Look, let me ask you something. You ever look around, see people your age, and it feels like everyone is doing better than you financially? Like they've got better clothes, better phones, going out more, posting things that make it look like their life is just smooth. And you're sitting there thinking, am I behind? Am I messing something up? Why does it feel like I'm working hard, but not getting ahead? Here's the thing, most people measure financial success the wrong way. They look at what's visible, not what's real. And this is where it gets dangerous, because you can be doing everything right and still feel like you're losing. Look, we're going to break down 3 signs that you're financially ahead of most people, even if it doesn't feel like it. And I promise you, at least one of these is going to completely change how you see yourself. Now, let's start with the first one. And honestly, this one is going to sound almost too simple. Sign number 1, you're not living paycheck to paycheck. Now I know what you're thinking. Okay, that's basic. Everyone says that. That's not impressive. But hold on, because this is where it gets really interesting. According to multiple financial surveys, like reports from organizations such as the Federal Reserve, a large percentage of people cannot cover a $400 emergency without borrowing money. Let that sink in for a second. $400. That's not a vacation. That's not a big purchase. That's a problem, a sudden expense, something going wrong. And most people are not ready for it. So when you say, I have a little extra left at the end of the month, or I can handle small emergencies, you're not average, you're ahead. And here's what most people don't realize. Not living paycheck to paycheck is not just about money, it's about margin. Think of it like this. If your income is $1,000 and you spend $1,000, you have zero margin. That means any small problem breaks your system. But if you spend $800, you have $200 margin. Now you can save, invest, handle emergencies, think clearly. And that last one, that's the most important. Because when you don't have margin, you don't think long term, you react. You make decisions like, I'll deal with this later. I'll just use my card. I'll figure it out somehow. And slowly, you trap yourself. But when you do have margin, something shifts. You start thinking like someone who has control. Now, this might sound small, but psychologically, it's massive. There's something called financial stress load. And basically, when your brain is constantly worried about money, it loses the ability to think strategically. So even if you're smart, you'll make short-term decisions. This is why people stay in bad jobs, avoid investing, delay improving their skills. Not because they don't want to grow, but because they don't have the mental space to think about growth. Now, this is where I need to challenge you a little, because some people hear this and think, okay, so I just need to earn more. No, that's not the full answer, because here's what most people don't realize. You can earn more and still live paycheck to paycheck. In fact, a lot of people do. Someone making $3,000 a month can feel just as broke as someone making $1,000. Why? Because their lifestyle grows with their income. This is what people call lifestyle inflation, and it's one of the biggest traps. You earn more, you spend more, and you feel exactly the same. So being ahead financially is not about how much you make, it's about how much you keep, and more importantly, how much control you have. Now let me give you a quick example. Let's say 2 people. Person A makes $1,500, spends $1,400, saves $100. Person B makes $3,000, spends $3,000, saves $0. Who's ahead? Most people will say person B. They look richer, they spend more, they look successful. But in reality, person A is building something, person B is maintaining an illusion. And over time, that gap becomes huge. Because $100 a month, invested at around 8% annually, in 10 years, that's over $18,000. Person B, still at 0, same years, different decisions. Now, you might be thinking, okay, but saving $100 is not going to change my life. And you're right, it won't change your life overnight. But that's not the point. The point is, it changes your direction. And direction is everything. Because financial success is not one big moment. It's a series of small decisions, stacked over time. Now here's where it gets deeper, because having margin is one thing, but what you do with it, that's where people separate. And that leads us into the second sign. But before we go there, I want you to really think about this. If you're not living paycheck to paycheck, even slightly, even inconsistently, you're already ahead of more people than you think. And if you build on that, That's where things start to change. All right, now the next thing, this one is a little less obvious.
And this is where people usually underestimate themselves.
So, the next thing, sign number 2, you're thinking about money long term. Now, that might not sound like a big deal. In fact, some people hear that and go, yeah, I think about the future sometimes. But that's not what I mean. I'm not talking about worrying about the future. I'm talking about planning for it, because those are two completely different things. Most people think about money like this. What do I need to pay this month? How do I get through this week? What can I afford right now? That's short-term thinking. And again, it's not their fault. When you're under financial pressure, your brain automatically focuses on survival. But when you start asking questions like, what will my money look like in 5 years? How can I grow this? What happens if I invest this instead of spending it? That's a shift. That's a completely different level. And here's what most people don't realize. That shift alone puts you ahead of the majority, because long-term thinking is rare, very rare. Let me show you why. There's a concept in psychology called delayed gratification, and it basically means, can you give up something now for something bigger later? Simple idea, but incredibly hard to do. There's actually a famous experiment, you might have heard of it, where kids were given a choice. Take 1 marshmallow now or wait and get 2 later. And a lot of them couldn't wait. Now here's the interesting part. Follow-up studies showed that the kids who waited tended to do better later in life. Better finances, better decision-making, better outcomes. Now, I'm not saying your life is determined by marshmallows, but the principle is real. When it comes to money, most people choose the marshmallow now. Spend now, enjoy now, deal with the consequences later. But if you're someone who pauses and thinks, maybe I don't need this right now, maybe I should save this, maybe I should invest this, that's delayed gratification. And that's a major sign you're ahead. Now, you might be thinking, okay, but I'm not investing a lot, or I'm just saving small amounts. That's not the point. The point is the behavior, because behavior creates results. Let's do some simple math again. Let's say you save $150 a month. Not crazy. $150 times 12 equals $1,800 a year. Now invest that at around 7 to 8% annually. In 10 years, that's around $25,000. In 20 years, over $70,000. And here's what makes this powerful. It didn't require a huge income. It required consistency. Now compare that to someone who says, I'll start later. Later becomes next year becomes someday, and someday never comes. This is why time matters more than amount. And this is where it gets really interesting, because long-term thinkers don't just make better decisions, they experience less stress. Think about it. If you're saving, investing, planning, you're not panicking every time something happens. You have a buffer, a system, a direction. But if you're only thinking short-term, everything feels urgent. Everything feels stressful. Everything feels like a problem. Now, let's address something honestly, because some people hear this and think, okay, but I want to enjoy my life too. And that's valid. You should. This is not about never spending money. It's about being intentional. Because here's the truth. Spending without thinking doesn't actually make you happier. It just gives you short bursts of satisfaction. Then you go back to normal. Or worse, you go back stressed. But when you build something long-term, you get something different. You get stability, confidence, control, and those last longer than any purchase. Now let me give you a real-life scenario. 2 people again. Person A gets extra $200, spends it immediately. Person B gets extra $200, thinks for a second and says, I'll use part of this for now and keep the rest.
That pause, that moment of thinking, that's the difference. Because over time, those small pauses turn into big results. Now, here's what most people don't realize. Long-term thinking is like a muscle. The more you use it, the stronger it gets. At first, it's hard. You feel like you're missing out. You feel like you're restricting yourself. But over time, it becomes natural. You stop chasing every impulse. You start making decisions with purpose, and that's when things really start to change. Now, before we move to the third sign, I want you to reflect for a second. Do you think about money long term? Even a little? Do you pause before spending? Do you think about future outcomes? If the answer is yes, you're already ahead of more people than you think. And if you build on that, that's where real wealth starts. All right, now the next thing, this one is the most powerful out of all three. And honestly, this is the one that separates people permanently. All right, so the next thing, sign number 3, you're starting to value control over appearance. Now, this one is subtle, because on the surface, it doesn't look impressive at all. In fact, most people won't even notice it. But internally, this is a massive shift. Let me explain. Most people make financial decisions based on how things look. They ask, how will this make me look? What will people think? Does this make me seem successful? So they buy things, not because they need them, not because they planned for them, but because of perception. And this is where people get stuck, because appearance is expensive, very expensive. And the worst part, it never ends. There's always something better, something newer, something more impressive. So you keep chasing it. But when you start valuing control instead, everything shifts. Now your questions change. Instead of, does this look good? You ask, does this make sense? Instead of, can I afford this right now? You ask, is this the best use of my money? And that small shift, that's where financial power starts. Now you might be thinking, okay, but what does control actually mean? Good question. Control means you decide where your money goes, not your emotions, not other people, not pressure, you. And here's what most people don't realize. When you prioritize control, you stop being reactive. You stop making decisions in the moment. You start making decisions in advance. And that changes everything. Let me show you. Let's say someone sees a phone they like. Old mindset. I want it, I'll get it. New mindset. Do I need it? Can I wait? What happens if I don't buy this? That pause again. That's control. Now, this doesn't mean you never buy things. That's not realistic. It means when you do, it's intentional. And that's a completely different experience, because now you enjoy what you buy, without regret. Now, here's where it gets really interesting. People who focus on appearance often look successful early. Nice things, good lifestyle, everything looks put together. But behind the scenes, no control, no savings, no stability. And over time, that catches up. But people who focus on control, they often look average, sometimes even behind. But behind the scenes, they're building something, quietly, consistently. And over time, they pass everyone. This is why you'll see someone living simply for years. Then suddenly, they're in a completely different position. And people around them go, wait, how did that happen? It didn't happen suddenly. It was building the whole time. Now, let's make this practical, because this is where people usually ask, okay, how do I actually apply this? So let's walk through it, simply. First, start paying attention to your decisions, not judging them, just noticing. Ask yourself, why am I buying this? Is it because you need it? Because you planned it, or because you felt something in the moment? That awareness alone changes behavior. Then, create small rules for yourself. Nothing extreme, just simple things like, I wait 24 hours before buying anything non-essential. That one rule will eliminate a huge amount of impulse spending. And here's the key. You're not restricting yourself. You're giving yourself time to think, and time creates better decisions. Then after that, start giving your money a job. Every dollar. Not in a complicated way. Just, this part goes to saving. This part goes to investing. This part is for spending. Because money without direction gets spent without purpose. Every time. Now, I want to tie all of this together. Because individually, these signs might seem small. But together, they're powerful. If you're not living paycheck to paycheck, if you're thinking long-term, if you're choosing control over appearance, you're not just doing Okay, you're ahead. Way more than you think. And here's the problem. Most people don't recognize it, so they compare themselves to others who are just better at looking successful. And they feel behind, even when they're not, so they start changing their behavior. They start spending more, trying to catch up, and that's how people lose progress. Not because they were doing bad, but because they didn't realize they were doing good. So let me say this clearly. If you have even one of these signs, you're on the right path. If you have all three, you're building something real, and the key now is not to stop, not to relax too much, but to keep going, because this is where most people slow down. They make a little progress, and then they drift. But consistency, that's what creates results. Not intensity, consistency. So, yeah, maybe you don't feel rich right now. Maybe it doesn't look impressive. Maybe no one notices. That's fine, because the people who win financially, they're not focused on being noticed. They're focused on building something that lasts. And if you stay on this path, that's exactly where you're headed. So, here's what I want you to do. Take a second, be honest with yourself. Which of these signs do you already have? And which one do you need to build? Because once you know that, you have direction. And direction is everything. If this helped you see things differently, make sure you hit subscribe, drop a like, and tell me in the comments. Which one of these signs do you relate to the most? Because I read those, and I want to know where you're at. And yeah, keep going. You're probably doing better than you think.